Our next presenter is Mark O'Brien from SpectraRep. He's going to talk about datacasting, and I think you'll find this very interesting.
I think I need both?
Yeah. Oh. Put that up right below your knob on the high.
All right. There we go. Double mic.
One's for the webcam.
Got it. Okay. Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
That's exciting to follow such a fantastic presentation about the future of wireless communications on the heels of another fantastic presentation about the future of wireless communications. And I'm going to talk to you about another aspect of the future of wireless communications. So what I want to describe to you is a new nationwide public safety network that, unlike today's public safety networks, is optimized for video distribution. It scales infinitely because it sends information out one-to-many, so now people can see helicopter video, and it doesn't matter if it's 10 or 100 or 1,000 people who need to see it, because you can get it anywhere it needs to go. This is a fully encrypted network, total public safety grade infrastructure. It's nationwide, it's operating now, and billions of dollars has been invested into this network. And the APCO people are looking at me like, he must be talking about FirstNet. No. I'm not talking about FirstNet. How many of you know what FirstNet is, besides the APCO? Oh, wow, okay, all right. So what I'm talking about is how we're leveraging today, using ATSC 1.0, and in the future, how we'll be using ATSC 3.0, to deliver encrypted, private, proprietary IP content. And today, the primary use of this is for public safety. So actually, before I even jump into my slides, let me just show a quick video that was produced by the Department of Homeland Security about this capability. And I do some work with DHS and Johns Hopkins University and some others in trying to get this to the next level. So let me just kind of set the stage here with this video. I guess the audio is going through the HDMI and not through my speakers. I don't know if I have a way to fix that. So maybe we won't show the video. Sorry. We don't have a way to get the HDMI audio up, do we?
You leave your microphone and put it next to.
Oh, next to that, next to the. Oh, the old way. All right.
Radio way.
Can we turn up the volume on this? No.
Necessarily have access to. What's really important is that we be able to drive information to our police officers, firefighters, and paramedics. We want to bring some of those capabilities to the first responder, and this project on datacasting is one of those efforts.
Every television station operates on a 6 megahertz channel. 20 megabits is coming out of every transmitter all the time, every television station all over the United States. What the process of datacasting is allocating a portion of that 20 megabits to sending out encrypted computer data. And so here comes public television and the ability to deliver that digital information today.
This datacasting being a model that also allows encryption, it allows us an opportunity to send secure information over a network. You have this TV signal that can be subscribed to that we don't have to worry about signals and getting. This is protected at a level much greater than where we are today. Video increasingly is important to the public safety community because they can get eyes on whatever they're responding to, whatever they're walking into.
We have folks that are watching cameras 24 hours a day, so when something happens, they'll report to the officers what they're seeing, but something always gets lost in translation. The advantage to this is we can send that video directly to the officers. They can look at an image and know exactly what they're looking at.
The idea of being able to share information with 10 or 100 or 1,000 or 1,000,000 people is so valuable to the public safety community, and that's one of the many reasons they have an interest in working with public television to address these issues.
So as that video mentioned, we're working primarily with public television stations today. But actually it works really with any broadcast television. And we're using it today using ATSC 1.0. And what we're doing is essentially what's coming with ATSC 3.0. We're broadcasting IP data, IP packets over the current digital broadcast system. And then in the future, as Dennis pointed out, all of broadcast television is just going to be IP. So this is kind of a stepping stone towards where we're going with that. So I want to show you, I'm going to show some video of how this is being used today. No sound. But first let me kind of go through some of the synergies and the benefits of putting together this public-private partnership between broadcast television and public safety. So what we do, so essentially what SpectraRep does, my company, is we have this technology, it's standards-based, it's part of the ATSC 1.0 system for ancillary data. We just use a box, it's an IP encapsulator essentially that takes computer information in, and on the output side it's ASI and looks like anything else coming through an encoder or anything else in the broadcast plant. So the multiplexer and the exciter and the transmitter says, oh, this is all MPEG transport packets, it looks good to me, off it goes to the transmitter and out it goes. Now, when it gets to the receive side, to the TV set, first of all, we're not in PSIP, we're not announced, so we're kind of a virtual .x channel, but we're not a true .x channel because we're not in PSIP, so the TV set doesn't recognize it as a .2 or a .3 or a .4 channel. It's totally invisible. On top of being totally invisible in the TV broadcast, it's also encrypted. All the information before we put it into the transport stream, we encrypt it using the same encryption that public safety uses today, AES 256. And so on the receive side, we have receive devices that in a police car will put a little USB dongle like this that takes a TV antenna, which looks like all the other little antennas on the back of a police car, and we'll put this in the console next to the officer in the police car and plug that antenna in, and then a USB connection into the laptop that's already in the police car. And now we have a new wireless network for getting content into that laptop in the police car. And then we've got some other receive devices. This is Ethernet out that will go in a command vehicle, for example, that has multiple computers, so we don't need to put one receiver to each one. But essentially, we're taking advantage of the existing broadcast television infrastructure that's already in place, made possible through ATSC 1.0, through digital television, to send ancillary data. And my company is doing the integration of all of that. We make a version of the IP encapsulator that goes in at the TV station. We make equipment that I'll show you in a second here that goes in at the public safety, the law enforcement, the police, fire, whatever organization, and we tie into their existing content. So I don't want to get ahead of myself here, so let me first kind of go through some of the benefits of public television, broadcast television in general, but public television primarily for this case. This is public safety grade infrastructure. This is always on, 24/7, public television, actually most television, generators, maintained by full-time engineers around the clock. This is all paid for under the broadcast television business model. So when we come into police and fire departments and say, we're going to bring you this capability, it comes with all of this on a silver platter, just there, ready to go. It's on licensed spectrum, which is a rarity. You can't just go build new networks, FirstNet excluded. And that took a long time, as Chief McEwen knows better than anyone. It took a long time to get that dedicated spectrum for FirstNet. This is licensed dedicated spectrum. And when we put this in place, it is full-time allocated to public safety. It's an always on, always available always there capability that's riding on top of existing broadcast television signals. So when we look at the other side of the equation, that's the broadcast side. On the public safety side, that world is changing too, even pre-FirstNet. If you look at a police officer today, the devices that they carry, the ways that they're communicating could not have been imagined even a few years ago. If you would have said 5 years ago to a chief of police, every one of your officers is going to be wearing a camera, they would have locked you up right then. That just was inconceivable. Drones, dashboard cameras, all of this is very video-centric in the public safety world, and public safety communications is moving more and more towards video information, and the days of push-to-talk are not dead, and I'm not saying that, Chief. They're here to stay for a long time, but they're being enhanced and augmented by these other communication pathways that are coming into play for public safety, and video is a big part of that. So how do you deal with that? How do you deal with every officer having a camera, every police car having a dashboard camera, every department owning and flying multiple drones, every fire department having multiple drones? You go into an operations center, and I've been in many, and they all have very similar qualities. They're very similar to a master control in a TV station. They're big rooms with lots of projectors in the front, and if you go in there during a situation, during an emergency, during a big planned event, like the Super Bowl or something like that, they have access to hundreds, potentially thousands of cameras in those rooms. Every traffic camera, whenever a drone flies. They can, typically the helicopters, they can see this information, and if you're in that room, you can say, if you have the authority to do so, put that up on the screen and let's all look at that, because that's important, and we've got to all see the same thing, common operational picture, so that we can decide what to do next. If you're not in that room, if you're the officer in the field, typically today, you're hearing what they're seeing on that video, with some exceptions. Some places are moved way past that, but in a lot of cases, especially in smaller departments, you're hearing over the radio what they're seeing in the operations center. So the elevator pitch for this essentially is this is a way to take the information that's already available in those operations center and share it with people who are not in that operations center, so everyone can see the same thing at the same time. So because we're in Pennsylvania, I did Pennsylvania coverage map. But this is public television in Pennsylvania. This is representative of the coverage that public television has nationwide. In fact, here it is nationwide. This is an unbelievable network. This is just public television. This is not all broadcast television. This is just public television. This is an unbelievable infrastructure that's already in place, operating, paid for, that is interested in partnering with public safety. Now, why are they interested in partnering with public safety? Well, there's the obvious one, bandwidth revenue. But that's actually not the motivator for public television, at least for public television. Public television gets a lot of funding from the federal government. Every year, you see in the news, oh, that's been taken out of the budget. No more funding for public television. And then every year, at the very last minute, it gets put back in somehow. And every year they have to fight for their life. That funding is always a battleground because people think it's there to fund Masterpiece Theater. It's not. It's there to fund small market public television stations who would have to go off the air without that, in most cases. And so, while public television can be a political football, public safety is not. Public safety is a universal, everyone is in support of public safety. And so when it comes to the story and the mission and who is public television and what are they all about, connecting to public safety is very important to them. So they're a highly motivated partner. They're not in it just for the money, so to speak. So one of the places where this is being used incredibly effectively and efficiently is in Houston. Right now, we're in Boston, Chicago, Washington, D.C., Houston, Las Vegas, and those are individual markets. And then we have some statewide networks in Utah, North Carolina, and a few other things coming, hopefully in Maryland soon, where public television is actually a state entity. In Pennsylvania, it's not, but all those TV transmitters are interconnected. In some states, in actually 20 out of 50 states, they're a state system, state network. So one entity controls the entire broadcast infrastructure for that state. In North Carolina, for example, I think they have 9 full power transmitters, all controlled by UNC TV. So one entity we can interface with, and we can broadcast content throughout the entire state. We can send it to just southern or just eastern North Carolina and not the other side of the state. We can send it to 3 transmitters. We can send it to all 9. We can send it to just 1. And we can take the bandwidth that they've allocated for public safety and use that to get information wherever it needs to go in the state. With the, state the obvious, benefit of one-to-many broadcast. So whatever content we push out over this TV broadcast, it doesn't matter anymore how many people need to see it. If there's a major fire in a big city, like Pittsburgh, and a hotel is on fire, and there are thousands of people in that hotel, and they all evacuate to the street, and what's the first thing they're going to do? What would happen if this room got evacuated? You'd call your wife and say, hey, you got to turn on the news. Or if you're watching the news, I'm okay. We had an earthquake in Washington, D.C. a few years ago, for those of you who were there. It was a real earthquake. It cracked the Washington Monument and the National Cathedral and did a little bit of damage, and that was very unfortunate. But no one died. No one got hurt. No buildings collapsed. But you couldn't make a phone call for 4 hours on any network, any wireless network in Washington, D.C. This has no dependencies on that. This broadcasts information right over top of it. And so when I mentioned FirstNet, I want to be clear, this is not in competition with FirstNet. This is something that we see as very synergistic with FirstNet. And we met with FirstNet. We're trying to talk to AT&T. They're a little busy right now. And so this is something that public television wants to offer in conjunction with FirstNet as a one-to-many licensed spectrum distribution capability to complement the native one-to-one distribution network of LTE. Now I know LTE can do multicast. That does support the multicast spec. There are trade-offs, but beyond the scope of this, I'm happy to discuss them. LTE multicast is not being used in most cases. In fact, not anywhere that I'm aware of because of some of these trade-offs. The biggest one is how it eats into the bandwidth, the spectrum that's available. And there's a lot of calculations that have to go into what's the best use. And so this is a way to bring multicast to public safety communications without impacting LTE. So back to Houston. This was used during the Super Bowl. This was used during the World Series. This was used during Harvey flooding. In fact, let me pull up a different video here while I'm rambling on, and you can actually watch some of this. Oops, no, let's not do that one. Let's do this one. So here's some drone video that was shot during Harvey, and they're flying drones looking for people on rooftops. This is the fire department. Flying drones looking for people who needed to be rescued during flooding in Harvey. This video was being broadcast over KUHT television in Houston to specifically targeted responders who wanted to know if there were any people who needed to be rescued. This is so early that that road wasn't even blocked off yet at the head end of that road, and they're looking to see how far down the road the flooding goes, where they have to coordinate to make sure that no one goes down this road. They tell me that prior to having this capability, the way they would have shared this information is the drone pilot would be watching this video, and the people who needed to have this information would be hearing, well, we're on 14th Street, everything's clear over here, I see some kayakers going down what should be a street, and they'd be hearing that over voice radio. Instead, they watched it live over the TV broadcast. So, you think of television, and the obvious thing you think of is video, and with good reason. Television is a video-centric network. And when we're sending drone video, when we're sending helicopter video, when we're sending traffic camera video, television is a great partner for that. But because what we're really just sending is IP packets, we're not actually sending video. It could be video in the IP packets, but we're really just an IP delivery network. We also have the ability.
This is a test. This is only a test for the Radio Club of America.
All right, that was quick. This is a message that I queued up and broadcast to myself. I broadcast it in Washington, D.C., and I remoted into my receiver in Washington, D.C. But this actually got to me over the television broadcast of WHUT in Washington, D.C. And this is a message. So this is a way to send notifications to people. If this had said, this is an Amber Alert, there's a missing child, over the television broadcast, I could also send a picture of that missing child. If this were an active shooter situation, I could also send the blueprint for the building, or where the hallways are, where the doors are, where the staging points might be. And by the way, that picture and this blueprint, I did broadcast to myself over television. Now, I did that in Washington, D.C., and I've got users in Washington, D.C. They didn't get it. Only I got it. Because in addition to being able to send it to an unlimited number of people like TV, I can also target specific users because all the information going out is encrypted. And when we set up a receiver, we do a public key, private key exchange. We know each receiver, and I'll show you that in a second if I don't run out of time. And I have the ability to say, send this information to this receiver only, to this group of receivers only, to police only, to fire only. But then, even more interestingly, here's information I want to send to police and fire. And if you're familiar with public safety communications issues, one of the big ones is interoperability. How do we share information between agencies? FirstNet is a big step in that direction. Everyone's going to be on the same network, on the same frequencies, and that is the big first step. This is one network. This is the same frequencies. Everyone who has a receiver can be individually targeted and can be rolled up into groups so that when someone wants to share information, they can, let me close this down here, share that with specific users. So let me actually jump into the live demo here, and I'll come back to the slides if there's time. This is the interface that we've come up with that runs in public safety facilities today. This is the interface I used to send myself an alert earlier this morning. What we see here is 3 different video previews, we call them. Now, they're coming from 3 different locations. The HEC 1, the HEC 2, and the Real-Time Crime Center. This is Houston. This is live in Houston right now. So in Houston, the Houston Operations Centers are not manned. There's no emergency going on at the moment. So they're not really sending anything. The Real-Time Crime Center is operational 24/7. So they're watching some traffic videos. Nothing too exciting, but if the helicopter flies, they'll be watching the helicopter. They have thousands of cameras they can pick from. And without getting into the details, I've provided them with a mechanism to pick which of those thousands of cameras they want to share with the datacasting system. So things are actually looking nice. It's not raining. Traffic's moving. Things are fine in Houston at this particular moment, because this is actually live video. If something were to happen, here's how they would target it. I don't know if you can see in the back of the room, but there's a little green circle with a number. You probably can't. A little green circle with a number in it. That number is the number of people who are targeted to receive this over the TV broadcast. So if we look at the Real-Time Crime Center, and they're watching this same video right now on one of their computers in their operations center, they can just click on this and pull up a list of people who are watching. And the things in blue at the top are groups, and the others are individual receivers. And so right now, 17 officers in Houston are monitoring this feed. And we can tell who they are because they have a check mark next to their name. All they have to do in Houston to add to that is put a check mark. They want to send it to Houston Fire Officer Guerrera. They just put a check mark next to his name, hit apply. Now he can see it too. Now we've got police and fire seeing it. But sometimes you don't want police and fire seeing it. Sometimes you want to control access to your information. And so behind all of this is just like any server system. When you log in, and I've logged in as myself, I'm an administrator on the system, I can see all of these receivers in police and fire. When a police officer or commander logs in, he can only see police. When a fire guy logs in, he can only see fire. They can't accidentally share information. When their boss logs in, like me, he can see both. So now, with the right permissions when they log in, they can start to just target information across agencies. And I want to illustrate for you an example of how that worked during the Super Bowl. So I'm switching, because I'm an administrator, I'm switching to a completely different system now. This is a system I can play with. I didn't want to mess anything up in Houston there. So this is just a single camera. Could be coming from 1,000 cameras. This is the one that was picked at that moment. And when I hit a button on my cell phone, another video pops up. So now I'm using LTE to bring video from my cell phone over the Verizon Cellular LTE network into this dashboard, and that's a red 0, no one's targeted. I'm not going to put you all on TV, but if I pull up the target list here, this is in Washington, D.C., and I check a box next to a receiver's name, that gets broadcast out. Just that easy. In Houston, in Boston, and a few other places, whenever the drone flies, another window pops up. Automatically, they don't have to do anything. The drone flies, it shows up. They want to look at it in the operations center, they can go full screen and look at it. They want to share it, they just select who they want it to go out to. It goes right out over public television. You're watching public television, you had no idea. You would have not only no idea, you would have no way to get to it because of the encryption. So a real world example of this is in Houston, I was down there helping them get set up for the Super Bowl. And before the Super Bowl, it was right after the election, and there were some protests for the election. So we're in the command center, and they're on the radio going, oh, we got protesters, where are they? They're 5th and Grand, okay. Do we have eyes on them? No, we don't have any cameras there. Well, tell me what's going on. It's not a very big crowd. Okay, that's good. Should we send backup? That's your call. Well, I don't have any information. In the meantime, because it's an operations center, police, fire, everybody's in there, one of the fire guys said, hey, I think I got a bike medic at that scene. He gets on the fire radio and says, hey, are you looking at this? He said, yeah, I'm looking at it right now. He said, well, turn on that phone thing. I should rename it. So he turned on his phone thing and started shooting live video, and now in the operations center, they're seeing how big the crowd is. They're seeing that they're not rowdy. They're seeing that it's not growing, that they're not on the move, that it seemed unorganized, and they went, oh, okay, good. Keep an eye on it. If anything changes, let us know. Situation dealt with. In that case, and in many cases, a picture truly is worth 1,000 words. Just seeing that made all the difference compared to hearing it described. Also in Houston, on the fire department side, whenever they have a second alarm or a multi-agency response, they will do a 360 around the building. They used to do that on the radio. They'd walk around the building and go, well, I see light smoke, and I see, you know, and it doesn't look too bad. And the people who are the decision makers are going, light smoke, okay. Now they do this in Houston right now today. They take the cell phones and they show what it actually looks like. And if there is they've had situations where there's been potentially, I'll turn this off, a bomb, and they're able to show video to the bomb squad. Had a situation yesterday in Houston, a gas leak at an oil refinery, major fire, and they're showing video back to people who knew more about gas leaks that they weren't able to see before. This is making a tremendous difference today, and when ATSC 3.0 gets here, it's going to be this on steroids, because we will no longer need this. We will no longer need this. We will probably no longer need this, because this is the next generation FirstNet public safety device. It's an LTE radio. There'll still be LMR, there'll still be other things, but this is where it's going. And one of the things I'll say working on in quotes, is if we can get the ATSC 3.0 chipset into the next generation devices, now everyone who has one of these new FirstNet devices is a receive point on this public safety network. Every one of them can be targeted. You don't need a special piece of hardware to do that. And that's the synergy that we're not there yet. It's still conceptual. But this is where we want to go. And I will say, one of the questions I get when I talk to public safety folks is, they go, well, Mark, that's all well and good. That's really nice. Thank you for that. That's really great. But it's one way. So we do two ways. When I get into this device, when I get into a laptop, when I get into a received product that has other radios, I live in that ecosystem. Now I'm part of that ecosystem. And now I am two-way. Television is two-way. As ATSC 3.0 will become in the future with hooks to the internet. And so now I can have someone send a couple of pings upstream, kind of like the early days of cable modems, where you had to connect it to a phone line and listen to the screeching because you wanted to see the news on CNN, and it would send a few packets up the phone line going, Mark wants to see CNN, and then all the CNN content would come down blazingly fast over that probably 100 kilobit cable modem, and you would see the CNN feed. That kind of integration is things that we're doing today, and the phone app is a perfect example of that. Tying together multiple networks to work as one in a seamless way so the non-technical police or fire officer can use the system and not have to think about, how's this getting to me? I want to see the drone video. There we go, great. That's the way it needs to work. And they don't care how it got to them. We just want this to be one of the pathways for it to get there. So I got to wrap it up, and I want to take questions, but essentially, here's how we're deploying this today. The Public Safety Operations Center typically has a video management system where they're monitoring hundreds or potentially thousands of cameras. So we have a box that we install there that attaches to their VMS. And in some cases, depending on the VMS, they can literally just right-click on a camera and say, and a new option pops up, send a datacast. They click on that, and that makes it show up in that preview window I was showing you earlier. Now they want to show a different camera, they pull it up, right-click, send a datacast, it changes it. So like a director of a TV program, they can change the cameras as often as they want and pick from their universe of what's available, what's important. That then goes to, it can go over fiber, microwave, satellite, but sometimes it just goes over a VPN over the internet, where we process that video in the cloud, we normalize it because it's different formats, it's different data rates. We re-encode that video, normalize it so it'll fit in the broadcast stream, and then we push it back to the TV station where you've got your HD encoders, your SD encoders, and our box, which is just ASI, which looks like all of that same video, which goes off to the transmitter and out to the field where they have today a receiver and some software that manages the targeting to say, am I on the targeting list? Am I authorized to see this? Cell phone video, helicopter video, and other content all being managed and processed through just that point and shoot. I want to share this way to these people. And also, obviously, the ability to put files, blueprints, and other information into the broadcast stream. So, I'm going to do in one slide what Dennis did in a very comprehensive presentation. As I said, the fact that this is changing is really exciting for public safety and the ability to get directly into the future FirstNet devices. It's just going to be, it's either going to be fantastic when we get into those devices, or as it stands today, it may not happen. And that's one of the things that we're wrestling with right now. How do we get Motorola and Sonam and Harris and the devices of the next generation public safety devices to talk to us about including this infrastructure so that this network can be part of it? We're live now, as I said, in half a dozen places in 2 states. This could be nationwide in a few months. There's not a lot of integration involved in making that happen. We're working with PBS and APS, the Association of Public Television Stations. They're lobbying very hard to get this included, but it's still something that's very little known, and we have a lot of work to do to get this to the point where it actually is deployed. But where it is in places like Houston, it's working great and making a huge difference in their ability to share information. And so I guess I'll stop there and make sure we have some time for questions before lunch.
What's your business model in terms of compensation for the services?
Sure. So the question is, what's the business model? Well, right now, both public television and SpectraRep are nonprofit. But us not by choice. So the business model is a service fee, a flat fee. We've actually been trying to figure out what the business model is. Early on, because we have to install equipment, we were saying the business model is we'll go get a grant, we'll get money to put everything in place, like in Houston, we'll build it in a place. And those grants were hard to come by. So we've kind of shifted our thinking to we'll amortize the cost of that equipment, and depending on some variables, how many receivers, how big, and all of that, a flat fee, a few $1,000s a month to a police department. I've got one group, a very small police department in rural Washington State paying me $250 a month, which is why I'm a nonprofit. I've got other places paying me $5,000 a month for a much bigger infrastructure, but just a flat fee, multi-year contract, flat fee, pay this, here you get everything I just described, soup to nuts, full support, all the bandwidth and everything, and we'll amortize the cost of the equipment to get it in there. The business model changes if we get traction with FirstNet and with AT&T, and that would be a discussion with AT&T to say, AT&T, you pay some flat fee, and you can have this nationwide as part of the AT&T deliverable to public safety. Yes, ma'am.
Have you got an audience going in all the manufacturers to get that into the next generation?
How do I, or
Have you?
have I? I have had conversations with Harris and Sonam and Motorola Solutions, and those are probably the big manufacturers of these devices. They've all expressed interest, and there's a wide area for me to fill between that expression of interest and it actually happening. And as Joe and Dennis and others can probably attest, one of the drivers, hopefully, is going to be consumer adoption of getting this chip into the phone. And so the R&D, the engineering, the NRE, hopefully, I think today you can probably buy a chipset from LG that could be designed into a next generation phone. It already exists. But as you may be familiar, there's also an FM chip in most of these phones, which is not activated. And so the carriers may or may not embrace the idea of having this TV chipset in these devices for public. But I think the public safety side definitely will. It's chicken and egg. If we put the receivers out there, will there be a transmission? If we build the transmission, will there be receivers? And that's really the
Are you driving it also from the user side?
Yes, we're trying to. So we have the people who are using it in Houston and some of the places where we're very active today are very vocal about the fact that they want to see this happen. But we're a very, very small company. Public television, apps, and PBS are doing most of the lobbying on that front to try and make that happen. Yes, ma'am.
Practically speaking, in current times, is there a way for this technology to be used to help the situation in, say, Puerto Rico?
Yes, potentially it is. So in Puerto Rico, the television stations in Puerto Rico were off the air for a significant amount of time, primarily because they could not get fuel for their generators. They had generators, but it was so devastated there that they couldn't do that. This capability exists in all 50 states and 6 territories. In the Virgin Islands, they were able to stay on the air. Where Harvey hit, where some of the other hurricanes hit in Florida, public television stayed on the air the whole time. This is 50 years worth of experience in staying on the air during major disasters. It's with very few exceptions that public television actually is impacted by those types of things and is still able to do that. Yes, sir, in the back.
Yes, thank you. One potential fine-tuning on the business case is to go after the chip makers themselves, specifically Qualcomm and Intel. And the other alternative is to have it all legislated in.
Yeah, there's a lot of baggage with legislation for legislating it in. That never happened with the FM chip. They said let the marketplace decide. Now this might be a little different because of the public safety angle as opposed to just consumers, so I get what you're saying there. So that is something that NAB and apps and PBS has been approaching. No one seems to have an appetite for a legislative approach at this point just because of the, it comes with its own set of concerns, I guess. But thank you. Yes. Yes, sir.
We had a presentation after lunch on broadcast TV channel repacking, and going along with that, our advent of channel sharing arrangements as spectrum gets more scarce. Do you see any challenges in securing bandwidth as public stations might actually be on a private sector transmitter in the future?
Great question about repacking and the impact of spectrum availability in the future. So ATSC 3.0, when we get there, today we get away from this 19.392658 fixed amount and we get more capacity. Even with channel sharing, depending on how they modulate it, what would you say, Joe, 25, 22, 27 megabits is a likely, I think that's what they did at NAB when they were doing HDs and some mobiles and other things.
Yeah, that's one of the mainstream use cases.
Yeah, so, 20-ish megabits. We currently use H.264 for our encoding. We'll switch to HEVC, and so we'll require less bandwidth as well in the future. The repacking, some public television stations did turn their licenses in. It wasn't many, it was single digits, I think. And in most of those cases, it was places where there was already redundant overlapping public television coverage. So public television didn't really lose any coverage. The real question, I think, is what happens when we do this lighthouse to the 1.0. The 1.0 signal is going to be very congested. By the time we do lighthouse, someone's going to be on the air with ATSC 3.0. And even with sharing multiple channels of content, what we're doing today is 1 megabit. 1 megabit out of the 19.39 megabits. In the future, it'll be 1 megabit out of 20 plus, 25, 27 megabits. And so the model is essentially this. Look, TV station, you would historically have used the full 19.39 to do your video programming. Now do it in 18.39 and leave 1 megabit empty. The same thing would apply, I would hope, in a lighthouse. This is to be determined, where we say, well, we've got to run the HD from 2, 3 other stations, and we got 27 megabits. Well, let's pretend we have 26. Let's just leave 1 empty, and that's all we need to do everything I'm showing you. Yes, sir.
Going back again to bandwidth and going just back to 1.0 because you want to really get a good proof of concept out there. Using one station in the same broadcast area that may have 10 or 15 different variable services, multiple agencies.
Yep.
How many simultaneous feeds can we run?
Great question. Yes, so I focus on the fact that when we get content, I can send it to an unlimited number of people. And the strength is a small amount of individual streams going to a large group of recipients. There is a finite amount. I can't broadcast 2,000 cameras. That's why I have the ability to pick from the 2,000 cameras which one. But in Houston, I have 3 video sources. During the Super Bowl, we had 30 separate preview windows. I don't have room to broadcast 30. So what they do is, I can typically broadcast in 1 megabit 4 streams at acceptable quality, acceptable being a negotiation. So, so every stream that comes in, I do statistical multiplexing just like they do with the regular broadcasting. So I allocate that dynamically across that 1 megabit. So each stream gets an average of 250 kilobits, but it might spike to 500 and it might dip to 50. It's just, it varies. But I've been working very effectively with 4 concurrent streams in that 1 megabit and still opportunistically sending files and messages on top of that, expanding opportunistically as packets become available.
Then as a secondary and tertiary question, well, let's go to tertiary, the easier one.
Okay.
The dongle that you have right now works with Android or with the Microsoft operating system?
No, because the current ATSC 1.0 standard is not mobile friendly.
Right.
We're really limited to police cars, command vehicles, things like this guy that go to a scene, start receiving data. In Houston, they had some Confederate statues they were concerned about, and they were monitoring them in vehicles like this nearby. It wasn't moving at the time. It works fine. We'll pick up mobility when we get to ATSC 3.0.
But if I'm a stationary mobile using just a whatever device, a laptop, Android device, does it work with what operating system?
Today, just Windows. We haven't. Windows. Now we can cross-compile into iOS and Android. We haven't because most of those devices are phones and tablets, and we don't want people having the expectation that they can run, down the hallway that's going to work fine, because it's not. 1 second, I want to show one other thing. So in this, I didn't get to this, but I got 2 gauges here. These are my bandwidth monitors here. So out of my 1 megabit in Washington, D.C., 1.1107.6, that's it's basically 1.1 megabits total on the TV station. I'm using 516K right now just to send this video, and it's going out at its maximum setting of 500 kilobits. If a second one comes in, it would go out at its maximum of 500K, and this would probably peak. If a third one comes in, it would query the 2 existing sources and say, I got a third video that wants to come in here, and I don't have room for it. What's your minimum acceptable? What's your priority? And it would stat mux and say, okay, if we drop down from the maximum preferred quality to the minimum acceptable, I can squeeze one more in here and it'll go out. And a fourth one would work the same way. And so we're doing things like that to optimize it, but it is finite. I will say very quickly though, on that point, public television has said universally, 100% across the system, that if there is a major disaster in their area, the highest and best use of their infrastructure is to help public safety. And so they will go to their encoder and hit a button to hit a preset that takes it from 1839 to 1739 to 16.39. They'll even turn off the cooking show or whatever and make another 2 or 3 megabits available for a period of time. Pardon?
Not Downton Abbey.
No, they won't do their HD, but they've got .2, .3, .4, and they will actually turn those off to make more spectrum available, which will give us more. And the last point on that is, in all of these markets I've described, including here in Pittsburgh, there's way more than 1 broadcast television station. So I'm talking about just public TV. If we really want resiliency, redundancy, and more bandwidth, we can go to more TV stations. We haven't had a requirement to do that yet. I think there was one last question before we wrap up.
I just wanted to ask you, around the state of Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Department of Transportation has these large control centers. The one I'm familiar with is in King of Prussia outside of Philadelphia.
Okay.
And they have, I don't know how many cameras, 300, 400, some enormous amount of cameras.
Yep.
This would be an obvious good use of that, wouldn't it? To be able to see road activity.
Can you make an introduction for me?
But I mean, are you using that in Houston, or
yes.
Is that one of your served agencies?
Not Department of Transportation. It's really the operations centers, which has access to all of the traffic cameras. And so they're monitoring in Houston a lot of those traffic cameras. And so.
And the other question I had is, who makes the decision about who sees things? The incident commander?
The operations center. Yeah, we don't. We're just like AT&T. We're just like, here's the network. They run it. So this is how they were monitoring things in Houston, watching. This is some flooded areas, and this road is not flooded but not open because it must be flooded earlier. They're monitoring things like that. This is some helicopter video, and then here's them using the cell phone app at a fire scene. This was all being broadcast, and all the ways they were using this down in Houston.
So thank you very much, Mark.